Welcome to Daily English Flow. Stay until the end for a special bonus tip. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
This is the brief on conquering the C1 English media barrier. Educational English is a controlled greenhouse, but native media like unscripted podcasts, movies, and live news is a messy, culturally dense jungle that leaves even advanced learners completely lost. First, let's tackle the acoustic jungle of entertainment, because native media simply isn't designed for learners. You're fighting audio masking, where loud explosions completely drown out the dialogue, indie actors who intentionally mumble, and people constantly talking over each other. Don't stress trying to translate every single word, just find the anchor voice. Focus on the person driving the plot forward and let that overlapping chatter become ambient noise. Second, watch out for the rhetorical trap of live news. Anchors use dense vocabulary, euphemisms like saying collateral damage instead of civilian deaths, and tricky passive structures to shape public perception and hide the truth. I challenge you to be a syntactic detective. When an anchor says something passive like, mistakes were made, ask yourself, who is the hidden subject here and who's actively avoiding the blame? Finally, we must actively reverse engineer what we hear by reading the literal blueprints of media, like an Aaron Sorkin screenplay or a Joe Rogan transcript, to catch that underlying rhythm. Then, practice adopting their exact speech patterns, like the serious downward pitch of a news anchor or a podcaster's casual filler words. You're basically building a wardrobe of vocal personas so you can put on the right voice for absolutely any social dynamic. By mastering the blueprints and syntax of native media, you stop being a passive language student and become a culturally fluent global citizen.
Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. We really need to talk about a uniquely frustrating experience. You know the one. You've aced every advanced English exam out there. You can write a flawless academic essay and deliver a presentation without even breaking a sweat. But then, you sit down on a Friday night to watch a critically acclaimed Hollywood movie, and within 5 minutes, you just completely freeze. Someone mumbles, the background music blares, two characters start interrupting each other, and suddenly, you are completely and utterly lost. We absolutely all know that feeling of defeat. It's what we call the C1 walk of shame. It's that exact moment you reach for the remote, pause the movie, and guiltily turn the English subtitles back on. But listen, I want to tell you right now, it is genuinely not your fault. It's actually the media's design. Native media simply isn't built for language learners. It's built for native speakers who already share a lifetime of acoustic expectations and built-in cultural context.
See, up until now, your educational English has basically been a highly controlled environment. Think of it like a greenhouse. It's safe, it's crystal clear, and it's nice and slow. But native media, things like movies, unscripted podcasts, live news broadcasts, that is the jungle. It's messy, it's super loud, it's culturally dense, and quite frankly, it does not care if you're trying to learn.
To tear down this barrier and survive the audio jungle, we're going to train your ear for the 3 most hostile arenas: cinema, news, and podcasts.
Let's kick things off with cinema. Have you ever wondered why you can totally understand a documentary, but a moody indie drama just sounds like absolute muffled noise? Well, the culprit is something called audio masking. Directors purposefully mix sound effects, rain, traffic, massive Hans Zimmer scores, at a much higher decibel level than the human dialogue. Actors are wearing these hidden lavalier mics that capture the raw acoustic reality of a room, complete with echoes and all that noise. So how do you actually survive this? You have to practice acoustic anchoring. Don't just obsess over the literal words. Listen to the environment, listen to the actor's breath, and use their pitch to help decode the meaning.
And this exact same chaos applies to the overlapping dialogue you constantly find in Aaron Sorkin or Robert Altman movies. In textbooks, people politely take turns speaking. But in the jungle, they talk right over each other. So when 3 people are talking at once, absolutely do not try to translate everything. Use the thread tracker strategy. Basically, just lock onto the plot-driving anchor voice and let everything else just kind of fade into ambient background noise.
Now, if we jump over to the news arena, the challenge shifts completely. Here, news anchors are practically speed reading from teleprompters at something like 160 words per minute. You're facing extreme lexical density. Instead of saying a simple casual sentence like, the government cut taxes, they compress massive amounts of information into these super dense, noun-heavy phrases like the controversial government tax cut initiative. This requires your brain to instantly perform syntactic unpacking. You have to lock onto the core noun and treat everything else as just extra descriptors. You also really have to develop a strong bias radar to catch what we call the euphemism treadmill. Journalists and politicians constantly use specific vocabulary and passive sentence structures to hide harsh realities or push a specific narrative. When someone stands at a podium and says mistakes were made instead of the CEO made a mistake, they are purposely using the passive voice to actively hide who actually caused the problem. Okay, moving into the podcast arena, you are now facing total unscripted chaos. Podcasts are deeply conversational and heavily reliant on random tangents. One major hurdle here is back-channeling. In any multi-host show, listeners are constantly making noises like yeah, right, and while someone else is speaking. You have to train your brain to completely filter out these noises. They aren't actual agreements or essential vocabulary you need to learn. They're literally just acoustic punctuation marks. Of course, just knowing the theory isn't enough. You need an actual strategy. The absolutely crucial point here is taking action with a targeted weekly media diet to upgrade your cognitive flexibility. On Monday, watch cinema without subtitles and really focus on spotting that acoustic masking. On Wednesday, analyze news debates specifically for their rhetoric and interruptions. And then on Friday, challenge yourself with a banter-heavy podcast at 1.2 speed to really force your brain to catch those rapid-fire cultural jokes.
Section 1. The Speaking Shift. Adopting Media Personas. Let's shift gears to actually speaking. At this advanced level, speaking is way less about vocabulary and entirely about performance, prosody, and adopting the right persona. When you consume high-level media, you're absorbing the music of different social archetypes. To pull this off yourself, you have to drop the over-polite textbook recitation. Speaking with a flat, unvarying rhythm just won't cut it in the real world. You really need to embrace conversational reductions and ellipses to match native conversational flow. So instead of stiffly asking, do you want to go to the store, adopt the media reality and just say, want to hit the store? By building up a wardrobe of these 4 specific vocal personas, you can master social dynamics in literally any setting. You use the podcast host for graceful interruptions and conversational management. You channel the news anchor for that distinct downward inflection and rhetoric of absolute authority. You adopt the screenplay character to deliver those flat, deadpan subtext lines. And you pull out the stand-up comedian to perfect that crucial pause right before the punchline in the rule of 3.
Section 2. The Reading Shift. Decoding the Blueprints. To truly understand audio, you have to reverse engineer the media. You need to read the actual blueprints. I'm talking about the screenplays, the unscripted podcast transcripts, and the broadsheet editorials. This lets you see exactly how the magic trick is built behind the curtain. For example, try running a syntactic autopsy on elite broadsheet journalism. Sentences in publications like The Economist can easily be 50 words long. But if you highlight the subject and verb in one color, the subordinate clauses in another, and the transitions in a third, you'll visually realize something amazing. 70% of a dense sentence is just contextual fluff wrapped around a very simple core argument.
Section 3. The Writing Shift. Synthesis and Scripting.
And this brings us right to writing. Writing at this advanced level elevates you from just being a passive consumer to being an active participant in the global conversation. It's all about synthesizing complex news, writing nuanced cultural criticism, and truly understanding the show-don't-tell mechanics of scriptwriting. To master this, try a fine exercise. Write a screenplay scene where 2 characters are absolutely furious with each other, but they are strictly not allowed to talk about their anger. They can only discuss the food or maybe just the salt on the table. Doing this forces you to master the incredible power of subtext. And here's the best part. Once you can write subtext, you instantly become better at hearing it in movies.
Section 4. The Lexicon of Culture. Spin, Banter, and Tropes. I am incredibly excited about this next shift. You really have to learn the highly specific, culturally loaded vocabulary used by native speakers to talk about the media itself, whether that's the calculated spin of politicians or the rapid-fire banter of internet culture. For instance, if you want to talk about movies like a film critic, you need terms like McGuffin. It perfectly describes something like that famous glowing briefcase in Pulp Fiction. It's an object that drives the entire plot forward, but is ultimately totally unimportant to the audience. Over in the news world, you absolutely must learn the vocabulary of spin. A vital term here is the dog whistle. This is coded language that sounds totally normal to the general public, but means something highly specific to a target group.
Identifying these terms neutrally allows you to analyze the news objectively, ensuring you are totally immune to political manipulation from any side. And for internet culture, grasping terms like parasocial relationship gives you the master key to understanding modern fame. It perfectly describes that fascinating, totally one-sided psychological bond a listener develops toward a streamer or podcast host. Honestly, kind of like the one you and I are forming right now. Knowing this vocabulary is literally the password to the Native Speakers Club. Section 5. The Grammar Shift. The Syntax of Chaos. Finally, let's look at grammar. In native media, I promise you, grammar is never neutral. It is either the messy, unscripted cognitive processing of a human thinking in real time, or it is highly engineered persuasion. It's not about textbook rules anymore. It's entirely about the speaker's intent. In the total chaos of podcasts, speakers use something called left dislocation. They toss the main topic at the very front of the sentence, saying something like, "That movie, have you seen it yet?" while their brain desperately searches for the verb. It's not bad grammar at all. It is real-time thought and cognitive management.
Meanwhile, news networks actively weaponize grammar using slick techniques like nominalization. Notice how they can take the active-aggressive verb attacked and magically turn it into the vague, abstract noun clash. So a sentence like, "The police attacked the protesters," smoothly becomes, "The clash resulted in injuries." This completely blurs the lines of accountability and neatly removes the actor from the sentence. So, once you become a syntactic detective, once you start hearing that missing subject, the abandoned clause, or the clever rhetorical trap, you are finally free from it. The whole illusion is just stripped away. So my final question for you today is simply this. Are you going to stay in the safety of the educational greenhouse, or are you ready to finally conquer the jungle and claim your seat in the global conversation?
Picture this. You've passed all the exams.
Right.
You've read the massive stacks of books. You can sit down and just write this flawless, highly structured academic essay, and you can deliver a professional presentation without even breaking a sweat.
You're an expert on paper.
Exactly. On paper, you're officially an advanced English speaker. So you sit down on a Friday night, you turn on a critically acclaimed Hollywood movie, maybe an indie drama, and within 5 minutes you are completely, utterly lost.
It happens to everyone.
The characters are mumbling, the background music is swelling.
Yeah.
Two people are interrupting each other in a dimly lit diner. And you find yourself doing what we call the C1 walk of shame.
Reaching for the remote, pausing the film, and turning the English subtitles right back on.
It is painfully relatable. Or you're commuting to work, right? You're trying to listen to a popular unscripted podcast. The hosts are laughing, talking over each other, making these obscure references.
Yeah.
And while you understand every individual word they are saying, the actual meaning of the conversation is just slipping right through your fingers. You are hitting the C1 media barrier.
Which is an incredibly frustrating place to be, honestly, because you feel like you've done everything right.
Yeah, I mean, you put in the work.
You've put in the hours of study. But the issue isn't your intelligence or your dedication. It's that the environment you trained in is fundamentally different from the environment you are trying to operate in now.
Right. And that is exactly the mission for this deep dive. We are tearing down that media barrier today.
Absolutely.
We're going to upgrade your ears, your brain, and your cultural database across all 6 core language skills. So listening, speaking, reading, writing, vocabulary, and grammar. We want you to consume media as a global citizen, not just as a student.
I love that.
But to do that, I mean, we have to completely change our perspective on what media actually is.
Yeah, so think of the language learning environment as a greenhouse.
Okay, a greenhouse.
Right. Educational English, so the classrooms, the textbooks, the audio exercises spoken clearly, slowly, and perfectly enunciated by voice actors.
The ones that sound almost robotic sometimes.
Exactly. That is all a highly controlled environment. The temperature is perfect. The soil is enriched. It is designed specifically for you to grow. But native media, on the other hand, the movies, the live news broadcasts, the unscripted podcasts, that is the jungle.
The jungle.
Yeah.
And the jungle is messy, right? It's loud. It is culturally dense.
It's wild. More importantly, the jungle does not care if you are a language learner.
Right.
A native film director is going to mix the audio so the explosion is louder than the dialogue because they want a visceral reaction. A native journalist is going to use syntax designed to persuade you, not to teach you grammar.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to survive the jungle, it feels like we first have to understand why it sounds so incredibly chaotic.
We do.
We need to move from just passively listening to actively reverse engineering the media. Let's start with cinema and podcasts. So I have to express my own frustration here.
Go for it.
Why does every actor in modern movies mumble? Like, why do they swallow their words?
It comes down to audio mechanics, really, and artistic intent. In cinema, the primary issue is audio masking.
Audio masking.
Yeah. Modern films use highly dynamic range mixing. So the sound effects, the traffic, the rain, the massive Hans Zimmer musical score, those are mixed at a much higher decibel level than the dialogue.
Oh, so they're literally drowning out the voices on purpose.
Exactly. And on top of that, directors today rely on lavalier mics hidden under clothing.
Okay.
Because they want to capture the acoustic reality of a room, like the echo of a hallway or the rustle of a jacket, rather than a clean studio voice.
Wow. Okay.
Then you add in what we call naturalistic acting. That's where actors deliberately use vocal fry, whispering, or they just trail off to simulate psychological realism. They're trying to sound like real people in distress, not stage actors projecting to the back of a theater.
Wait, hold on. If an actor intentionally swallows the end of a word for psychological realism, how am I supposed to catch it?
That's the trick.
If we can't trust our ears to hear every syllable, how do we train our brains to anticipate all this chaos?
Well, you have to shift from hearing to predicting. We use a strategy called consonant prediction.
Consonant prediction.
Right. When an actor drops the end of a word, your brain has to predict the missing consonant based on the vowel and the immediate context. So if an actor says, I'm going to gild the sore, you don't wait for the final T or R sound.
Right, because they just aren't there.
Exactly. Your brain must autocomplete go and store instantly.
But doesn't that require me to already know the vocabulary perfectly? Like, if I'm not a native speaker, predicting a missing consonant feels like a bit of a catch-22.
It feels daunting at first, sure, but your brain is actually a highly efficient prediction machine. You aren't just relying on vocabulary, you are relying on acoustic anchoring.
Acoustic anchoring, so how does that work?
You stop trying to isolate individual syllables and you start anchoring to the environment. You separate the emotional tone of the voice, which is the foreground, from the noise, the background.
Oh, I see.
You rely on the actor's breath, their pitch, and their physical acting to narrow down the possible words they could even be saying. You're decoding the intent, which makes predicting the actual word much easier.
Okay, that shifts the burden from my ears to my context-gathering skills, which makes sense.
Exactly.
But what happens when we move to podcasts? There's no physical acting to look at, there are no facial expressions to read, and sometimes you have, 3 people talking at the exact same time?
Yeah, overlapping dialogue is the absolute hallmark of unscripted podcasts, and it's also heavily used in movies directed by people like Aaron Sorkin.
Oh yeah, the rapid-fire walking and talking scenes.
Right. In your textbook, person A finishes their thought, pauses, and then person B starts. In the jungle, people talk over each other constantly.
It's just a wall of sound.
It is. The strategy here is the thread tracker technique. If 3 people are talking, you cannot try to translate 3 distinct streams of audio. You have to pick the anchor voice.
The anchor voice.
The person driving the plot or the main argument forward. And you force your brain to treat the other voices as ambient noise.
Kind of like tuning out the drums and the bass to just focus on the lead singer's melody.
That's a perfect way to look at it. And a massive part of that ambient noise in podcasts is what linguists call back-channeling.
Back-channeling.
Yeah, so while the anchor voice is talking, the other hosts are constantly throwing in little words, like, yeah, right, literally.
Just like I'm doing right now.
Exactly. To someone trying to parse every word, you might try to process every single yeah as a vital piece of the argument.
Which would completely overload your short-term memory. Like trying to translate 50 yes a minute while following a complex debate on economics.
Precisely. Because those words aren't vocabulary. They're acoustic punctuation. They just mean, I am still listening, keep going.
Wow, okay.
You have to build a filter in your brain to categorize those sounds as commas and periods and filter them out entirely so you can stay locked onto the anchor voice.
But doing that in real time feels like trying to run before you can walk. I mean, is there a way to practice this cognitive filtering without just blasting a podcast at full speed and hoping for the best?
There is, actually. And this brings us to an unexpected tool, reading.
Reading?
Yeah. At the C1 level, reading isn't just about absorbing a story. You are reading the blueprints of the media.
Okay, reading to improve listening. Walk me through how that actually works.
If you want to understand overlapping dialogue, go read a screenplay.
A screenplay?
Yeah, when you look at a script, the pacing is dictated by the white space on the page. A dense block of text visually tells your brain to expect a long, uninterrupted monologue.
Right.
But rapid-fire, single-line exchanges, that visually trains your brain to anticipate overlapping actors. You are learning to hear the architecture of the conversation before it is even spoken.
And for podcasts, I imagine we are looking at transcripts.
Yes, read podcast transcripts while you listen to the audio. It is eye-opening. You will see what we call spoken syntax.
Spoken syntax, so like all the messy bits.
Exactly. You'll see false starts. You'll see how transcripts use em dashes to signify sudden interruptions. You'll realize that filler words like or I mean aren't mistakes. They are rhythmic placeholders.
Oh, that's interesting. So they're doing a job.
Right. People use them to buy their brain an extra half second to construct the next sentence. Mining these transcripts bridges the gap between your reading brain and your listening brain.
So we are learning how to decode the acoustic messiness, the mumbling, the overlapping, the chaos of people just trying to formulate thoughts in real time.
Right.
But what happens when we step out of that unscripted environment? What happens when the media we are consuming isn't messy at all, but is perfectly scripted and highly engineered?
Well, then we shift from acoustic messiness to linguistic weaponization.
Weaponization. That sounds intense.
We are talking about the architecture of the news and digital media. Live news broadcasts are the exact opposite of a casual podcast. They present a cognitive hurdle called lexical density.
Lexical density. Okay.
News anchors read from teleprompters. They are delivering dense, written-style syntax at 160-plus words a minute, usually with 0 natural pauses.
Right. They just keep going.
And to speak that fast, they have to compress massive amounts of information into noun phrases.
Give me a sense of what that compression sounds like in practice.
Okay, so instead of saying a normal conversational sentence like, the government cut taxes and the public is very happy about it, a news anchor will say, the controversial government tax cut initiative has sparked widespread public approval.
Wow, that is heavy. They took the action, cutting taxes, and turned it into a massive, abstract thing. The controversial government tax cut initiative.
Yes, that mechanism is called nominalization. They are turning verbs into nouns.
Okay.
And it is incredibly strategic. Instead of saying, the police attacked the protesters, they will say, the clash resulted in injuries.
Oh, wow. That completely removes the humans from the equation. It makes a violent event sound like a natural weather phenomenon. The clash resulted in injuries. Nobody's actually doing the injuring in that sentence.
It diffuses agency. And it pairs perfectly with another tactic, the strategic passive. If an anchor says civilians were killed in the strike, they're actively hiding the actor who dropped the bomb. It directs your attention away from the cause and only toward the tragic result.
Now, we have to be very clear for anyone listening right now. Media from across the entire political spectrum does this.
Oh, absolutely.
Left-wing, right-wing, centrist, it does not matter. It is a universal tactic of rhetorical manipulation. We aren't endorsing any specific viewpoints here, but as global citizens, we absolutely have to recognize the mechanics of how these ideas are packaged.
Right. Recognizing the mechanism is the only way to disarm it. Once you start spotting that passive voice and those nominalizations, it's like seeing the code behind the matrix. You can't unsee the manipulation.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You also have to navigate the euphemism treadmill. Networks use specific sanitized vocabulary to soften harsh realities. They will say collateral damage instead of civilian deaths. They will say economic headwinds instead of a recession.
Or downsizing instead of firing 1,000 people.
Exactly.
So how do we train our brains to cut through this? Because on live television, this linguistic spin happens so fast you barely have time to process the sentence before they move to the next headline.
I recommend the op-ed translation exercise. Take a highly biased political opinion piece from any major newspaper, take a red pen, and literally cross out every spin word, every euphemism, and every passive evasion.
Okay, cross it all out.
Then rewrite the sentence with the blunt, literal truth. It forces you to actively dismantle the architecture of the spin.
That sounds like an intense workout for your critical thinking skills.
It really is.
But let's contrast that heavily engineered news grammar with the grammar of internet culture and unscripted banter. Because earlier we said podcasts are chaotic, but there's an underlying structure to that chaos too, isn't there?
There is, and it stems from cognitive load. In unscripted banter, speakers have to manage information flow in real time. They can't plan a perfectly structured sentence while simultaneously listening to someone else.
Right.
So they rely on something called heads and tails, which linguists call left and right dislocation.
Heads and tails. I think I do this without even realizing it. Walk us through the mechanics of that.
Let's say a podcast host wants to ask about a movie. A perfectly grammatical sentence would be, "Have you seen that new Marvel movie yet?"
Sure.
But in real time, their brain might not have the whole sentence ready, so they put the main topic at the very front to establish it, anchoring the listener while their brain builds the rest of the question. They'll say, "That new Marvel movie, have you seen it yet?"
Oh. Which, if you are sitting down for a strict grammar exam, might get marked incorrect because of the fragmented structure.
Right. But in the jungle, it isn't bad grammar. It is highly advanced real-time cognitive management. It's how humans naturally handle the mental load of a conversation.
And part of managing that conversation is knowing the cultural shorthand, the vocabulary that native speakers use as a secret code to talk about the media itself.
Yes.
Our sources provided a fantastic list of C1 lexicon terms, but instead of just defining them, let's look at how they function in the wild. Let's say a politician is caught in a scandal. A news anchor won't just say the politician looks bad. They'll say they're trying to manage the optics.
Right, because optics doesn't just mean public relations. It implies a cynical manipulation of the truth. It's how a situation looks to the public, regardless of what the actual facts are.
And to manage those optics, that politician might use a dog whistle during a speech.
Which is coded language. It sounds like a perfectly normal, innocent phrase to the general public, but it sends a very specific and often controversial message to a targeted subgroup of their supporters.
Meanwhile, people at home are experiencing a parasocial relationship with their favorite political commentators.
That's a fascinating psychological phenomenon. It's the one-sided emotional bond a listener develops toward a podcast host or an influencer. You listen to them every day, so you feel like they're your close friend, but they have no idea you even exist.
And because of that bond, those listeners might stay up until 3 a.m. doom scrolling through their feeds,
Endlessly consuming negative, anxiety-inducing news on their phones. It's a compulsive behavior driven by the algorithms of the platforms themselves.
Even in entertainment, we use shorthand. Like, if we are watching a heist movie, we don't care about the actual gold in the vault, we just call it the McGuffin.
Right, because the MacGuffin is just an object that drives the plot forward, but is ultimately unimportant to the character arcs, just like we might roll our eyes at a trope.
Like the chosen one in a fantasy movie, or the detective who plays by their own rules. It's an overused theme.
Exactly.
Knowing these words isn't just about vocabulary. It's about having the password to the Native Speakers Club. It gives you access to the actual conversation happening behind the content.
It absolutely does.
So what does this all mean for us? We've learned to decode the input, the listening, and the reading. We've uncovered the hidden architecture of the grammar and the cultural shorthand. Now it is time to flip the script. We're stepping onto the stage. Output, speaking and writing.
This is crucial. At the advanced C1 level, output is no longer just about grammatical accuracy. It is about performance, tone, and cultural participation.
I like to think of it as a vocal wardrobe. You wouldn't wear a swimsuit to a high-stakes corporate boardroom, right?
Hopefully not.
In the same way, speaking advanced English means knowing exactly which vocal persona to put on for which specific social context.
You are absorbing the music of different social archetypes. Think about the personas we encounter in the media. First, you have the podcast host. Their core skill is conversational management. They know how to execute the graceful interruption.
But you can't just talk over someone loudly, right? That's just rude.
No, it's about preserving the flow. Instead of shutting the other person down, a podcast host will say something like, "I hate to jump in here, but I want to make sure we unpack that last point before we move on." It's an interruption framed as a benefit to the conversation. They also master the pivot smoothly, transitioning away from a dead-end topic without making it awkward.
But if you took that casual, friendly interruption and tried to use it in a high-stakes environment, say, delivering a national broadcast, it would completely undermine your credibility. So how does a news anchor use their voice to do the exact opposite?
The news anchor persona is all about the rhetoric of authority. They use a distinct downward inflection at the end of their sentences, which signals absolute, unquestionable certainty.
Oh, right.
They aren't asking for your agreement. They also utilize the 2-second dramatic pause to let a heavy fact settle. And crucially, they use stress-timed authority. They crush the minor grammar words like the or a to heavily emphasize the nouns and verbs.
Like the Prime Minister has announced a radical new policy.
Exactly. The rhythm dictates the importance.
So we have the casual podcaster and the authoritative anchor. But what about when we are trying to hide what we're feeling? What about the movies?
That brings us to the screenplay character persona. This is all about mastering subtext. It is the art of delivering a line where the literal meaning of the words is the exact opposite of your emotional meaning.
Saying one thing but meaning another.
Yes. A great exercise to practice this is taking a very simple phrase like, I'm fine, and forcing yourself to deliver it with entirely different subtexts.
Oh, let me try this. Give me a scenario.
Okay, first scenario. You are genuinely happy. Everything is great.
I'm fine.
Second scenario. You are absolutely furious at your partner, but you refuse to admit it.
I'm fine.
Third, you are being entirely sarcastic.
I'm fine.
Fourth, you are heartbroken, holding back tears.
I'm fine.
And fifth, you are actively lying to a police officer.
I'm fine.
See, the vocabulary didn't change once. The grammar didn't change, but your breath, your pitch, and your physical delivery shifted the entire reality of the sentence. That is the power of subtext.
It's acting. Okay, what about comedy?
The stand-up comedian persona is really the final boss of speaking. It's entirely about pacing and timing. Specifically, comedians rely on the rule of three.
Okay, the rule of three.
You establish a safe, predictable pattern with two normal items, and then you shatter that pattern with a third absurd item.
Like saying, I need to grab my keys, my wallet, and my sense of impending doom.
Yes, but the secret isn't actually the funny third item. The secret is the microscopic pause right before the third item. That fraction of a second of silence builds the tension. That pause is where the comedy actually lives.
Okay, so we have this incredible wardrobe of speaking personas. But how does this output translate to the page? Writing at this level surely can't just be summarizing what happened in a movie or writing a basic response to a news clip.
No, writing at the C1 level demands a shift from summarizing to synthesizing. You are no longer just reporting information, you are joining the global conversation and shaping it. An incredible exercise for this is the executive news synthesis.
How does that work?
You take a major, controversial, global event. You read a heavily biased left-wing article, a heavily biased right-wing article, and a dry, factual, international wire service report. Your task is to write one perfectly neutral 150-word briefing.
Which means you have to actively strip away everything we talked about earlier.
Right.
You have to remove the euphemism treadmill, the nominalizations, the spin.
You have to extract only the hard facts from the wire service and maybe briefly note the narrative spin that the political articles are trying to apply. It requires immense critical thinking because you have to recognize the bias before you can delete it from your own writing.
And what about writing for cinematic subtext? We practice speaking it, but how do we practice writing it?
You practice the ultimate rule of script writing. Show, don't tell. You write a screenplay scene where two characters are absolutely furious at each other sitting over dinner. But, and here's the massive constraint, they are not allowed to talk about their anger, and they are not allowed to talk about their relationship.
Okay.
They can only talk about the salt on the table, or the food, or the weather.
Like, could you pass the salt? I don't know, could I?
Yeah.
You always assume you can just take whatever you want.
Yes, exactly.
All that betrayal and anger is just boiling right under the surface of a completely mundane conversation.
And when you force yourself to write subtext like that, your ability to hear it when you are watching a movie skyrockets. You suddenly understand intimately the constraints the actors and writers were working under. You recognize the hidden layers.
This has been an incredible journey. We have officially moved from the highly controlled, perfectly measured greenhouse of educational English out into the wild, unpredictable, messy jungle of native media. We've decoded the audio masking of modern cinema, the lexical density and calculated spin of the live news, and the unscripted, overlapping chaos of our favorite podcasts.
We've equipped you with a real toolkit. You now know how to rely on consonant prediction. You know how to filter acoustic garbage and backchanneling. You know how to translate rhetorical spin and how to adopt the vocal personas of the media itself.
To everyone listening to this deep dive, remember this. Conquering native media is not a test of your vocabulary size. It is a test of your cognitive flexibility. You are stepping out of the classroom and onto the global stage.
But if we connect all of this to the bigger picture, it raises a deeply provocative question.
I like that.
If educational English is a controlled greenhouse and native English media is a messy, manipulative jungle, what happens when you apply these exact same analytical tools to your native language?
Oh, wow. That is a terrifying thought.
I challenge you to do it. Start listening to the live news broadcasts in your own country or the unscripted podcasts in your mother tongue. Apply your new bias radar. Look for the euphemism treadmill in your local politicians' speeches. Listen for the heads and tails in your friends' banter.
It's all there, isn't it?
You might be shocked to realize just how much syntactic manipulation, how much subtext, and how much acoustic masking you have been navigating your entire life without ever once noticing it. The jungle isn't just in English, the jungle is everywhere.
That is going to completely change how I watch the news tonight, no matter what language it is broadcasting in. So, for your Friday night movie this week, you know exactly what you need to do. Throw away those subtitles. Put on your best pair of headphones. Embrace the C1 walk of shame, not as a failure, but as a badge of honor. And enjoy the jungle. Catch you on the next deep dive.